Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today we have another great guest. As our ongoing subscribers, our ongoing listeners know, often on this podcast, we'll be sharing ideas and insights and best practices for building professional relationships and excelling at business networking. But from time to time, I bring on subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists. They're going to share their knowledge to help us build better relationships and help us understand why we interact the way we do. Today's guest is Alissa Carpenter. Alissa she's got quite a, this is what I call an ABC intro. She was featured in Forbes, NPR, ABC, Fox, I guess that's not letters, but still FOX, Fox, CBS, and she's done TED Talks, and she works in workplace inclusion. She has a master's in social and comparative analysis, and she's got a master's in education as well. But she empowers leaders with practical strategies to communicate effectively with their diverse workforce. And we truly have a diverse workforce. She started, or I don't know if she started, but she worked at the Wharton School. She was an administrator at the Wharton School, and she's got a Gallup certified, she's a Gallup certified strengths coach. And through all of that, she's trained thousands of leaders and consulted with multi-billion-dollar enterprises to help them successfully bridge the communication gaps between genders, job functions, geography, it goes on. And if you can just think about the world now, we don't all live in one little town where everybody's from one little town. She's also the author of one of Cosmopolitan's top nonfiction books for 2020, How to Listen and Be Heard, Inclusive Conversations at Work. And she's the founder of Everything's Not Okay, and That's Okay, which is a consulting firm. And she's the creator of DE&I, Intention to Action, How to Be a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Change Maker, which is an entire program. Welcome. We're out of time now. We did that whole introduction. No, that's great.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming in. Interesting story for our listeners. Early in 2020, I had read about her book. I don't get Cosmo. I saw it somewhere else. But I had read about her book and I ordered it. And I'm like, I have got to get this person on. And when COVID hit, I had all these people who were professional speakers who were like all of a sudden available. Like, I've got to interview these people. And so this whole Alissa's book, got put on the back burner as far as interviewing. And then somebody introduced me to her. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And I pulled the book off the shelf. And here we are. So anyhow, great book. I enjoyed the book. And I'm going to get you on here twice. I want to talk today about working with toxic people because I think that's important to relationships. Not everybody we run into is great, but there's a story in the book that I really want you to share. The opening story in chapter 10, Working with Toxic People. I don't want to paraphrase it. I'll kind of let you do that, and then we'll jump into other things with respect to this.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Thanks for having me on, Frank. It's just funny. It's such a small world how everything kind of comes together.
Yeah.
So one of my first jobs out of grad school was actually my second job out of grad school. And like many jobs, careers that people have, the information isn't necessarily readily available. So it's kind of the sink or swim approach. You go your first day and you're thinking, is there an online database? Is there a file? Is there something where I can find information? And this particular job didn't have anything. It was, you learned on the job, maybe you wrote it down, maybe you created a manual or did whatever you needed to do. So my way of really getting to understand the content is, and I was working with students at the time, so helping with their academic path. And if you do something and you do it incorrectly, that can lead to a lot of things going wrong. And I remember talking to one of my colleagues at the time and just asking them questions about different scenarios. What would happen? What would this look like? And they gave me an answer. And I took it for what it was, went back to the individual, had the conversation, and realized it was just completely wrong. It was just not even close to being the right answer. It was a poor situation. I felt like my rapport at the time, my reputation was kind of on the line, just given the current situation and giving the wrong information. Went back to that particular colleague to ask another question, just hoping, okay, maybe this is a misunderstanding. After walking in on them and hearing them say that I gave Alissa the information wrong on purpose. So this was an intentional attack on me as a new employee. They gave me the wrong information to give to the client. So I'm thinking I'm going to be really just optimistic. It's fine. Maybe again, misunderstanding, and went to that individual again and got that information wrong again. And it's just awful to be in that situation, knowing, one, that this person is toxic and doesn't have my best interest in mind, that it not only in fact impacts me as an individual, but our team, the organization as a whole. Just the ramifications of what this person did was just so big. And knowing that somebody could have a vendetta against you and not know you at all, having been there was very hurtful and very harmful to the relationship really with that colleague and our team. So it was definitely a swift kick being in the workforce and what can happen and how relationships can exist or not exist, and how crazy really people can be in this space when they feel threatened in any type of way.
That's yeah, I mean, that's a great example. I mean, obviously that's a situation where they are mean-spirited, and they probably don't realize how bad it is because we all have these biases in our heads, but it's, in my mind, that's clearly them. I've had lots of people talk to me about their toxic relationships, and a lot of times I take it with a grain of salt, and you raise it in the book here. And the first thing you talk about, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, well, maybe it's me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's
me. I went through that process, right? Because thinking there has to be this reason. And I think, sometimes we're saying, oh, it's a toxic environment. All of my colleagues are toxic. I can do this job better than this person or this person or this person, just in all different spaces. There's always a problem. And thinking, maybe, and that's a hard realization to come to. Maybe it's not these 40 people. Maybe it's something about what you're saying, what you're doing, your expectations. And even going through this process, I was the youngest by at least a decade, if not 2 decades in the position. The team had been there for a really long time. It was a little threatening. And I think the way I came off might not have been the best of, I am so excited to be here. Let's do these things. Let's create these new projects. I was just so excited and energetic being newer in the field. And I think if you're very comfortable in your position, it hasn't changed for a while, you don't necessarily want that younger person, I guess, to succeed and do well. And then you have more work on your plate than you were anticipating, and they were close to retirement. So by no means is that excusable behavior of that individual. But once I can kind of grasp a little bit of what was going on and how I was acting and potentially toxic in a different way, it was a little bit easier to kind of manage and adjust my behavior accordingly.
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, that's for sure. You talk about types of toxicity or types of toxic people, and I think they probably, you list 7 in the book, I believe. I counted 7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tend to be toxic, but I'm not necessarily great with numbers, but I think it was 7. At any rate, just can we quickly kind of identify these for people? Just, I'll read them off and you just kind of quickly what that is. The self-absorbed.
It's the person that's always shifting the conversation to them. And those people, it's always about them, what they're doing, how they're acting. The spotlight has to shine on them.
Yeah. Enough about me. What do you think about me, right?
Exactly.
The blamer.
Oh, these are the people who just don't take responsibility for anything and everything. Something could go wrong. They might have dropped the ball on something, and it's not about them doing it. It's something that you did or something somebody else did that made that situation worse.
Okay. The controller.
It's a person who has to lead in any type of way, has control over the situation, and doesn't want to relieve control or give somebody else even the opportunity to succeed. And some people like that. That's a great plan. I'm glad you feel that way, but this is the direction we're going to go in. So they always have to have the final say.
Gotcha. The dramatizer.
It's that person that always, and I really stirs up drama. They can go from office to office. And I've been in situations like that where they're trying to get people involved, get their team of people who want to be part of that drama with them. Can you believe this person said this? Do you believe how ridiculous this assignment is? Or we're all so busy, really just trying to stir it up for the rest of the group.
Okay. The complainer.
And I would say this person is, we've tried this before, this didn't work, or if it's not broken, don't fix it. They're not really interested in doing something new or different, but are really on board with complaining about things that are happening, that are going on.
Oh, we kind of talked about this one, the saboteur.
And that's the person I would say that my colleague was. So outright intentionally sabotaging something. And that doesn't have to be giving the wrong information. It could be not giving the appropriate resources, time, budget, knowing that that's needed for somebody to succeed or for the group to succeed.
I started as a tax person, and this doesn't happen anymore because it's all online, but there were people who would kind of hoard different resources from the library. So I can't do my research on investment tax credits because the books aren't there and you have no idea where they're at.
And they don't really need them. They might need them for a short period of time. It's okay, give it back.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last is the critic.
And that's always somebody who's critiquing anything and everything. So I've worked with people too, and potentially have been that person where it's not just the work, it's, why are you eating at this place? Or why are you talking to this person? Or why are you doing this? It's critiquing each and every aspect of an individual, a team, an organization that really has no bearing on anything, quite frankly. Okay. It's just their opinion and want to critique it.
All right. I'm going to totally put you on the spot here. But I was thinking about this as I was preparing, but you're putting together a team, right? And so these 7 are lined up against the fence, and you've got, like the old, as a kid picking your ball team. Who's the one, if there were 7, which of these one would you choose to work with? You had to pick one.
I would say the dramatizer, just because I've been in that situation more often than some of the other ones. And I think I understand how they operate and work and know when to kind of shift the conversation, when to give them a little bit of what they need and then shift it and then have them refocus. Because it's not that they're not willing to work together or try. It's just bringing something that could be small to me, but important to them. So just kind of having those conversations, but being able to shift it a little bit. Some of the other ones are just hard and fast, hard to work with.
Yeah. In the job I worked in public accounting, we had a guy, and behind his back, of course, we called him Eeyore because everything was, oh my God, down. One woman announced she was pregnant. He goes, oh my God, isn't that great? She's pregnant. Oh, it's horrible. Why is it horrible?
Right.
Because I'll probably be fired now if they're going to fire somebody. It's like, oh my God, serious? But I agree with you. That's who I would pick because I don't want to say you can control it, but I could deal with it better. And the
only hard part would be if they are more influencing, I would say, and like get more people in this toxic dramatization, right? You have who you call kind of your colleague of Eeyore, and I don't see, it seems so far-fetched that people be like, yeah, you're right, her pregnancy really is impacting my life. If you have somebody who's just like that, you can kind of play around with it. But once they bring people into this actively disengaged state, it's tough to get out.
Yeah. Who would be the last person you pick?
Oh, well, probably I want to say the saboteur, just because it's just so mean-spirited and there's nothing. I want to get to the root cause of it and what happened and why, just in general. But there seems to be an underlying issue that just in general that isn't really about potentially people in there. It could be an old manager, it could be an experience they had in the past. So that I think is really hard to unpack and make changes and move forward. Like that takes a lot of time and a lot of trust to build up there.
That I wrote mine down, and I went with the same ones you did. The saboteur, I just, in my mind, well, I'm sure in their mind they rationalize it, but in my mind, it would take a lot for me to trust them again. It would just take a lot. So, all right, so we have toxic people.
It could be outwardly telling you the information. Somebody like the critic, or like whatever, I'm just going to ignore them. Like they can think what they want or whatever. Somebody's essentially stabbing you in the back with something, or in the front potentially. It's hard to make your way around that.
Yeah. So how do we address these behaviors? I mean, obviously they're different. There's a million different little iterations and scenarios, but you kind of talk about how to tackle these things in a general sense.
And I want to clarify too that some of this, it's not toxic people, right? So, and we were talking a little bit before that, I mean, there may inherently be toxic people within your organization, whether they're in the organization or your life just in general, but these are toxic behaviors that people have. So it can be people who are not mean-spirited, who just are having a bad day or something came up or had a bad experience, and then these toxic behaviors are coming into place. And I think if you have an established relationship with someone who's exhibiting these behaviors, it's a little bit easier to address them. I think if you're newer in the profession, you don't know them very well, it's very hard to call out somebody's behavior and then expect them to change immediately or at all. If you don't know them, they don't know you. And then it kind of gets in this, I'm going to say, screaming match back and forth. So, and none of these behaviors, and they can exhibit this way, but we see people in organizations who yell at each other back and forth. And that doesn't get you anywhere either. But to me, a big part is really establishing that relationship and trust. And once you have that, then you can start to have these conversations. And when you do it, it's really about being specific and sharing those facts while expressing your feelings. And what happened, when did it happen, what was said, what was not said, what resources weren't there. The more information you can give and the more specifics about what's happening is helpful, because sometimes, and I think toxicity, when we're now talking about the workplace, but this is for people in general.
Sure.
You can't just bottle up everything and then 6 months later, it's like, you're letting things roll off, and then 6 months later, you're bringing up everything that ever existed with this individual that makes them toxic or makes your relationship toxic. Kind of addressing them each of, this morning at this meeting, this was said, or this afternoon, or in this email. Address it when the situation comes and figure out, is this something that is important for me to address, is important for me and me to develop and build this relationship with this person, meaning you have to work with them consistently. And with that, to me, a lot of it is I statements. So, you and I might have the same feeling or impression about somebody, but it is not it is not our team feels this way. It is about you and your thoughts and your feelings and what was said and what happened. And I think that gets lost sometimes, or we try to bring up things in public spaces that aren't public space conversations. This is really one-on-one conversations about what you did, using those I statements about your feelings.
Well, I don't want to say we default to that, but we may hedge towards that as almost kind of an escape plan. Okay, if they go ballistic, well, I don't really feel that bad. You know what I mean? But what you're basically saying is you need to go all in. I'm going all in, and basically saying, this is how I feel, and you said this, and I don't know what other people feel. You might, but that's not relevant to the conversation. The one point you make in here, which the only behavior we can control is really our own. And the other note I wrote in the margin was, we need to respond and not react, and that's always a hard thing. When you're walking in and you're hearing that this person's sabotaging you, lack of a better term, you have an emotional reaction to that. We all do. What else is happening to me? What else am I? You can't rely. Who can I trust here? That's kind of a reaction, and if you go with that emotional reaction, a lot of times it can backfire on you. But what you're really advocating is kind of gathering your thoughts. Well, obviously you wrote a book on it.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of kind of writing it down or almost acting it out, or just thinking about what happened, what did it look like, how did it make me feel, and what can we do differently next time, or what are some suggestions I have, or how can we kind of revisit this. And you're not going to say to this person, I can't believe you sabotaged me, it felt like crap, or any of those things. Even if you're talking about that book of, I was really upset when your team, took all of those books. One, am I able to borrow them right now? Do you need all of them? Is there another way that we can return them at a certain time, so we all have the opportunity to be able to use them, to be able to complete kind of our tasks or jobs, or, whatever the case may be, because they might not even know that you need it, or when you needed it, or anything like that. I think you have to have those just in time conversations. And I always even say to myself now, the only really behavior or thoughts or feelings you can control is yourself. So whenever I am in, having a toxic conversation potentially with somebody, or something came up, it's how I can address it. I cannot force anybody to change who they are, how they feel, or what's happening. But it's important to allow that other person to speak as well, and let them share their opinions or thoughts. And a small tweak I think that you can make in your sentence is sometimes we say, I'm sorry if you feel that way. I'm sorry if that happened to you, but it's not an if, it's a that. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that, I didn't put those books away. I'm sorry that I gave you the incorrect information. So it's so difficult with communication, because you can write down a script, if you will, but it can go 100 different directions. And you can say this, and I can say this. And, it's coming back to your main point of the reason why I want to have this conversation. I'm looking for this end result, or this is what I want. Just understand why you're having this conversation with somebody, what you're looking to happen. Are you trying to bring awareness to them? Are you trying to change something for the future? What do you want to get out of these conversations with people? And again, don't say you're a sabotager, you're a critic, you're this person that's, doesn't get you to where you need to go at the end.
Yeah. I mean, the book is geared for the workplace, and you acknowledge that. But this stuff happens in the entrepreneurial world. The only difference is that, I see all these things. The only difference in the entrepreneurial world is, the entrepreneurial world is dating, right? Having a job is being married, because to leave that job, unless you have something waiting for you, it's a much bigger step. Whereas if I run into these things, I just choose to, I'll just refer somebody else, or I'll, use a different vendor. So we have a little more flexibility in the entrepreneurial world, but these things absolutely happen. Okay. Steps, you kind of went through, how to talk about these things. What if they don't work?
These are things that you're going to have to revisit consistently and constantly over time, right?
Right.
You, again, cannot change people's behavior right away. And it depends what this level of toxicity is, what it means, what it looks like. Does it just bother you and frustrate you a little bit? Is it impacting your ability to help your clients, for you to actually complete your job? Like, what is really happening because of these relationships? And even though in entrepreneurship, it's different, right? You can go get a different client, you can refer the other people elsewhere, but you may be able to shift some things around to what you're doing, so you're not working with that person in the same capacity as you were before. So if you're not in a leadership role, even going to your supervisor and starting the conversation, going to human resources, what can you do? Are there other teams that you can be involved in? Because sometimes if people don't change, and I had a supervisor in the past too, who would just yell for no reason. He was really upset about something and would just scream and yell at all of us. And the next day everybody would get flowers. And it was just so toxic to be in that space, until you went to human resources and we had the conversation, and what does this look like? How does it make you feel? So sometimes, again, it's out of your control to do that, especially what level you're in, right? If this is your supervisor who's being the toxic person, they're not necessarily going to change because of you. So really identifying Again, what you really want to get out of those conversations, but continue to do it and don't take the bait for these things too. I've been caught in the past with the dramatizer space, somebody coming with you and trying to stir up controversy or stir up drama or gossip. Don't take the bait from somebody else. If somebody else is upset about somebody, try not to get in on their argument and be upset with that person too because of that, right? You fall down the rabbit hole, I think, just really easily. So recognize your behaviors, what they look like, and how you can move forward.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears here. Good book, Alissa Carpenter, How to Listen and Be Heard, Inclusive Conversations at Work. How can people get a hold of you? What would be a good referral for you? Who are you trying to talk with or talk to?
Sure. My website is the best way to get a hold of me at notokaythat'sokaycoach.com. There's a form in there to fill out, or on LinkedIn under Alissa Carpenter. And I work with really companies and organizations with teams to help them bridge those communication gaps. So some of them are going to be toxic colleagues and things that happen. And how do we overcome that? How do we work together through that? And a lot of it is just getting to the bottom line of communication. So what does inclusive communication look like? How can we meet our clients where we are and meet our organizations where we need to go? And I work a lot with human resource professionals. So good referrals for me are HR professionals looking to bring somebody in, whether it's for trainings or speaking engagements, to make those things happen.
And any particular industries, or do you kind of do it all, or do you niche, or?
It's not really in a specific industry, since we're all really dealing with the same type of things. I've worked with nonprofit organizations and broadcasting and industrial, higher education. So it really runs the gamut, but it's with people who have teams. So it's organizations that work collectively in some capacity with one another.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being on the program today.
No, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.